Hi there. So here we are today with Sarah Anthony, and this is a conversation that we're going to have about how to create the life that you want to live. You know, that kind of magical, perhaps a little bit elusive dream life. And we're going to explore the tools that you can use to have a really positive impact on your life and on your relationships. And these are the tools that you can use to guide the decisions that you make about your life, and how we can use those to, particularly for this channel, which is about home design, how you can make sure that your home design is then a right fit for you. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. It's really lovely to have you with me. Sarah, for those of you who have not met Sarah Anthony before, Sarah is a transformational and motivating coach, and she coaches business leaders and teams to realize their full potential and exceed their goals. And she also trains coaches through accredited coaching programs which she develops. So my first question in this, you do a lot of different aspects of coaching, and I was wondering, could you give me a kind of summary of what your mission or your purpose is with the work that you do?
Absolutely. Well, hi everyone, and lovely to be here today. So absolutely, one of the things that I really want to help people to do is to feel confident and capable and credible as coaches. So I work with a lot of coaches and leaders. So it's all about developing that confidence to use coaching skills in whichever way you're going to use them. So whether it be as a leader, whether it be as a coach, whether it be just in your life, because these tools are useful for your life. And I have found that for myself when I first started training to become a coach, that I had, I thought I was just going to become a coach, but I developed so many other areas of my life as a result.
It's so interesting because I know that coaching has had some kind of mixed reputation, let's say, over the last few years. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I know some people can be quite dismissive of coaching, and I've had positive and mixed experience. I wouldn't say I've had any really negative experiences, but we've all heard in the news and seen documentaries of some possibly, not ethical, or perhaps you wouldn't really consider them to have actually been really coaching. And I just thought it'd be really useful to get a better understanding of what actually is coaching. What would you say it is?
I'm so glad you asked that question because you are right. A lot of people think they know what coaching is. They think it's about telling people what to do. And that's where the problems begin, because if you think about life coaches, for one, who are you to tell me what to do with my life? And actually, that's not what it's about. It's about us helping people to learn more about themselves, to pay attention to themselves, to notice what's going on for them, and then to decide what they want to change and how they want to go about it. So it's not like if I was coaching you right now, I wouldn't be saying, oh, by the way, I think you should do this or that or the next. I'm helping you to understand yourself better, to notice what's not working for you, and to create better results for yourself, but through your own ideas. Because the belief is there in coaching, and it's not the only thing you can do to that. Let me get that straight. We're not saying we're better than any other thing that's out there, but coaching has this belief that people are full and whole and able to make their own decisions. So sometimes therapy may be needed, sometimes mentoring may be needed, because you might not have all you need to know before you go into, I know that in business sometimes I've had coaches and I've had mentors, and when I've had coaches, it's because I know what I need to do. I just need the push and the shove to do it, and I need the help to get over myself and my blocks. When I've had mentoring, it's because I don't know and I need the information first.
Would you equate mentoring a bit to teaching? or consulting, like giving you knowledge and guidance rather than coaching?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, it seems guidance, I don't know if that's more a coaching or a mentoring thing, but
it
you know, what
depends
would be
it
the
depends.
difference, would you say?
Yeah, so guiding, it depends how. So, because am I guiding you by telling you what to do, or am I guiding you by helping you to find your own way? So, absolutely. But so we use a matrix, and that matrix is whether you are helping someone to move forward, and whether you're helping them to deal with problems. And so consultancy would go on the problem side, but it and so with therapy, teaching, mentoring, and coaching go on that side. But then we also have on the other kind of apex, whether we tell them what to do or whether we help them to find their own answers. And in therapy and coaching, they would be at the top, and consulting, mentoring. So there are differences between all of them. But essentially, you're right. When you're giving information, in the giving information side of things, mentoring, teaching, training, consulting, they all kind of fall into that same area of, I'm telling someone, I have a purpose in telling someone, but coaching is more about helping them to find their own way.
Great, that's really interesting. And what I how would somebody know if how would they be able to identify if the coach that's coaching them is actually coaching them in a kind of ethical, positive way, and that they've made the right choice of person to work with?
Well, I mean, obviously, I do accredited coach training,
Yeah.
and I would say get some accredited coach training. First of all, get training, because a lot of coaches think they're doing the right thing, and they are being helpful. There are so many coaches who come to me who say, oh, I know how to coach, I just want the certification. Then they take the certification, then they're like, oh wow, I didn't know how to coach. So get a certification, because besides anything else, if you want to be a coach, lots of companies now will ask for that. Lots of companies will ask, who are you accredited by? And they will want to see a certificate, but also kind of who's it backed by. So we're backed by the International Coaching Federation, which is one of the kind of biggest organizations out there that accredits coaching. So that's one thing. But even if you want to just dabble in coaching and come for self-improvement, then I would still go for that accredited coach training provider, because you know that you're getting a robust, solid, credible qualification. And
So
that's why we went into accrediting our work.
yeah, sure. So if you're somebody who's looking for a coach, look for somebody who has got an accreditation. That would be the key.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, so if you're a coach, go for the accreditation. If you are looking for a coach, ask them, do they have accreditation? I think the other thing is noticing if they build up things like agreements at the start with you. How do they start that off and build an agreement with you and ask you questions? If they start bringing up their own content and saying, oh, well, I did it this way, I think you should do it that way, then they're not necessarily coaching. Now, you might want some advice, but they should at least be able to tell you, I'm going to use a variety of techniques, and here are what the techniques I'm going to be using, and describe that to you. So I often say I'm a coach, but sometimes I mentor people as well in coaching. So I will say, I'm going to use a mixture of coaching and mentoring.
Would a good coach give you the choice? So would they say, I can give you some advice on this based on my experience and knowledge? Would you like that? and offer you that, or how should it be?
I mean, pure coaching, the answer would probably be no. However, in the real world, when you're working with people who you know and where you know some of the things around that content, I think sometimes people don't have what they need, and so working to what your client needs, as long as you can help them to understand. So, for example, if you're working with someone helping them with their home design, you have expertise there. to stand there and say, well, what do you think? What do you think? And try and pull answers out of them may not always be what they need. They may need you to give some advice.
Well, I often have clients who say to me, well, you're the expert, just tell us what to do. And so that I know from conversations with many coaches that they've told me that the way that I work does incorporate a coaching style, a coaching element, because I'm very interested in knowing what my clients really need and want, and what a dream life looks like to them, so that I can create a home that helps support them in living that dream life. And so I need to know information from my clients to be able to create those designs for them. So I don't feel like it's my role. I don't think I'm doing people a good service if I say to them, well, you should live like this, and so you need a house that looks like this. That to me is not the right way to do it. I know a lot of architects do that, but that's not the way I approach it. But I think that's an interesting thing, because some people have said to me, well, you know, you're the expert, just tell us what to do.
It's one of the hardest things in coaching, because people do sometimes say, I don't know, can't you tell me? And we need to turn around sometimes and say, well, actually, I could tell you, but I'm not going to, because I think it's best that you get the answers out of you, and that you realize that you have what it takes to do that. And I think that everybody could be a bit more coach-like. You know, ask a question instead of just giving someone the answer straight. I do it with my daughter all the time. It may annoy her sometimes, but
stop coaching me.
No, what do you think? And you know, how would you do it? And trying to get her to be a bit more creative, rather than, Mum, can you help me with this? You know, so the mean mum who pretends to be coaching when really she's just giving her daughter a hard time. That's how my daughter sees me. Sometimes.
It comes from different perspectives on it. So one thing that really fascinated me on your website, it says building transformation communities of people living from the inside out, and that to me is really interesting from an architectural perspective, because when you think about buildings, and then obviously a building has an inside, and then there is the outside of buildings. So from an architectural perspective, it has some interesting sort of possible understanding of that. And then from the way that I work with my clients in terms of trying to understand them, trying to understand, you know, what are their daily frustrations, what are their daily moments of pleasure and joy, and what would they ideally like to see their ideal day like, and then how can we create that space based on that. So I always say that I design houses from an inside out perspective, based on people's needs and the functionality of the space. And I have had clients, or potential clients I would say, who've come to me and said, you know, our house is really ugly, what can we do to make it look better? Can we make this, can we extend here to balance how it looks? And that kind of, because that's not the way, I don't work from that outside in. I do look at how it looks, and the aesthetics of it comes into it, but that's not my starting point. And so I have sort of felt stumped with clients who come to me from that perspective, because then I'm like, well, you know, yes, you can build an extension there, but what do you want to do inside the extension? So I'm really interested to hear from you how that translates, or what that means from your perspective as a coach.
Well, one of the things that I've done in my coach training is that we have our own IP, and I have a co-founder who I work with, so that's why I keep saying we when I talk about the certification. And so one of the models that we developed was around this inside out concept, and we call it the North Point meta model, which isn't very sexy, unfortunately, but and it's all around our belief that there is an internal world and an external world. and both are important. So your thoughts and feelings are your internal world, and your values and beliefs as well. And then on the external world are your actions, the things you do, and the impact you have. So if, I'm kind of thinking as I'm speaking about how that relates to what you were just saying. And we believe that true transformation has to start from the inside. And it has to start with the values, the beliefs, the thoughts, the feelings. And then it's expressed into the external world. And the external world is your actions and the impact you have, the result, really. And so in order to get everything in line in the way we're working, that can be a positive thing, or it could, this is what happens in our lives. So we have our values and beliefs that are underlining things. We have our thoughts, feelings that lead to our actions and impact. And I'm drawing it in a circle because that's my model. And we are creating the external world through our internal world. And so we have to start there, because otherwise, if things aren't matching up on the inside, it's not going to work for us. We're going to get stuck. And we're going to not necessarily get the result we want. Or if we do, it might be by accident rather than by design. So we need to create this kind of internal understanding of what we want first, that leads to our external results.
It's so interesting what you said there, because I have spoken with people about how your home, the space that you have, can actually define you, because it can restrict and limit what you're able to do and how you're able to do it. And so then that moderation of your behavior, how you can interact with other people. So if the space is too small, for example, I have a very small kitchen, and to have multiple people cooking in there, it's awkward. And when I have a party, I'm always like, can you please just go out?
No parties in the kitchen for you.
Yeah, there's not enough space for people to hang out. And although I don't like to be stuck in the kitchen on my own when there's a party, it's also not possible to have people hanging out with me in there whilst I'm trying to get stuff done, because I'm always running, in the beginning of party, and people arrive on time and I'm not quite finished to do what I need to do. And so that kind of limitations of the space can really affect you and how you're able to behave. And that can then, so I'm really, really looking forward to getting into this conversation about your beliefs and your values, because I do speak with my clients about how they feel about things, the emotional impact it has on them. And I speak with them about what they do on a daily basis and what they're trying to do on a daily basis, but they're struggling to do, they're frustrated by things like, I had a client who, similar to me, she had an awkward kitchen, and she would have people come and try and hang out with her while she was, managing refreshments, creating refreshments to bring it back through to the lounge. And she was feeling quite isolated from the hosting experience, because it was awkward. There wasn't space for too many people to come and spend time with her there, and whenever they did come, they'd be like standing in front of the fridge, and she'd have to say, oh, could you just step aside while I get some milk out, that kind of thing. So kind of awkward. So that's the level that I tend to work at. But I think it's interesting, I don't go into that kind of beliefs and values piece, and I think that would be really interesting to explore.
Well, I'd love to. It's a topic I love. So
also, let's go. You actually sent me some really interesting questions. So you said, how do values help you to create your dream life? And I was thinking, what is the importance of those values and the beliefs and how they shape our lives?
So first of all, have you ever, let me ask you a question, have you ever felt like you were totally on purpose and everything was going brilliantly and life was just amazing?
I don't know. That's a really difficult question to answer.
Or did it feel like flow, like any time when everything just seemed to flow?
Do you know, the only time that I really feel that is when I'm drawing, when I'm sketching. That's when I feel in flow. There isn't any other time in my life when I really feel like that. So yeah, I'm not sure I can identify.
Well, then at that time you are experiencing living your values. So when you're drawing, that's when you're experiencing your values, because you're feeling totally in flow. Now there may be moments when you feel sort of in flow, and that means some of your values are at play. Equally, have there been times in your life when you're just feeling, this is not working out, I don't know what's wrong here, like just can't make this work?
I definitely have more of that experience.
Oh no. Then that's when values are not at work, because our values are things that are most important to us in our life. They're the things that motivate us. And when life is good, it means everything is aligned. So I can think of times when I've had, maybe when I was younger, when I've had jobs and or I've been traveling the world, and I've thought, oh, this is amazing. And I can put it down to a few of my values. Now I look back, I maybe didn't realize it at the time, because our values play unconsciously, regardless of whether we know about it or not. They're there. So we don't know that they're playing in the background, but they are. And we're trying to live our values. But sometimes we get taken away from them because we're not conscious of them. So when we are living our dream life, our values are being met and we're aligning with them. And when we're conscious of them, we're then able to play to those better.
So how do you become conscious of them? How do you know what are my values, and how can I use those to guide, what I'm doing?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, I would never ask what are your values.
Okay.
Or I would never give you a list of values and say, pick your values from here. And the reason is because you tend to then pick what you think you should pick. Oh, that one looks like a nice value, I'll take that one. Integrity, yes, I'm supposed to be that, have integrity, I'll take that one. And I'm not calling anyone out and saying you don't have integrity, but it may not be your top value. It may be in there, but it may not be the top values. So there are thousands of values out there, and I believe that we all have them all within us, but it's the top priority values that are really important for how we want to live our lives. And so we need to kind of try and find those out. And actually, it's fairly simple, because I've told you a minute ago that values are what we hold most dear, what we consider to be most important in our life. So there are a few questions that I ask to elicit them. I elicit values with every single client that I work with before I get into the proper coaching, because I think it's important that they know what's important to them in their lives. Because when we set goals, if we don't set them based on our values, we can find out our goals aren't the goals that we really want, which, we're talking about homes at the moment. Imagine if someone said, oh, I think I want, I want to prioritize my lounge space over my kitchen, and then they have the problems that you've been talking about in the kitchen. Then you've suddenly realized that you've set things upon the wrong goal. So it's about finding out what are those values, so I can base my decisions and my goals on them. And it's really simple. The first question I would always ask is, what's important to you?
But how do you know? Because it can feel like, I've got an endless sort of continuous to-do list.
Yeah.
And then prioritizing those can be quite tricky. So how do you know what that those three things are the most important things to me?
Okay, so first of all, there's a process I would take people through, and one is to elicit the values. So in the listing, I would ask questions like, what's important to you? But I would also dig into those. So for example, if you said family to me, I would ask, okay, what does family give you? I wouldn't accept family as a value. Family is a vehicle for achieving your value. So it's one of the ways in which you achieve a value that's underneath. So you might say, well, they give me love, or they give me peace. Not in my case, but sorry, my daughter's getting a real bashing today.
Oh.
It's lovely, by the way. So You may say support. And so those would potentially be values. And then I may ask you, okay, what do you love about the work you do? If I ask you, what do you get when you draw? What would your answer be?
Oh, I don't know. Peace, relaxation, contemplation.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me see the world around me in a different way, and I get quite philosophical thinking about different things. Yeah, it's kind of a reflection and a quite meditative
Mm-hmm.
thing.
And what's important about that to you?
I don't know. I'm not very good coaching.
No. What does it give you? What does it give you? Let's take one of them, reflection. What does reflection give you?
It gives me a sort of a sense of better self-understanding and to some extent confidence, and a self-expression and an identification of things that have interested me or things that have caught my eye or I found beautiful or important.
Yeah. So from that, I got that expression, self-expression, beauty, and understanding yourself are things that are really important to you. Would you say?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably true.
Yeah. So if I were to dig a bit deeper into your values and different things, I would find that out. So the other thing I would do is ask about hobbies or things they enjoy doing, because that gives a sense of when people are enjoying doing something, their values are at play.
I see. So one of my hobbies is belly dancing. So,
Ah.
and that's very also a lot of self-expression and creativity and beauty and music and self-understanding and reflection of what's going on, and that's sort of a dialogue between the music and the movement, yourself and the musician, the perform as a performance. So yeah.
Do you hear all the values now starting to come out when you were saying that? So
Yeah.
there's lots of values coming out as you're speaking to me. So I would ask you what's important. I would dig into that, and I would also ask you about your hobbies and so on, and what's important about, dig into those a bit. What does it give you is a question I often use. And then I would also ask you what frustrates you the most, because the opposite of that often is a value. It's often triggering a value. So, if you hate people being late, for example, then you may have something that's, timeliness. It might not be timeliness. No, it could be respect is underlying value there. So it's about helping people to understand where their triggers are as well.
Is this a process that somebody could go through on their own through like a journaling, like answering those, like journaling around those questions that you just posed? Or is it something that you really need an external person to help sort of reflect, kind of hold a mirror up so you can see that?
Yeah, the answer is yes. You can do it through journaling, and I think you come up with more when you're being asked the questions, because a coach or even someone, it doesn't have to be a coach, it could be someone who just knows the question, who's just asking you those questions, but they see things that perhaps you don't, and so that they can push you a little bit to dig in deeper to some of the answers to the questions. So I've had situations in our coaching training where people have come up and they've done the pre-work, and we tell them not to do their own values, but they do them because they're curious, and they come up and I've got my list of values. Then we do the exercise and they get different values that come out because they haven't had that realization. So it does help to have someone challenge you on them.
So I work a lot with couples.
Yes.
Which has lots of interesting, there's a lot of interpersonal different things going on there. But what do you think that for couples, this is something that they could do for each other as part of the process of like figuring out, you know, what really is most important to you, and then the next stage could be in terms of, you know, creating your ideal life and creating your ideal home design for that life. So that could be a process that they could do together.
Absolutely, yeah. The other thing, I think it would be great to have a couple do that with one another and to work through it, because then they get a better understanding of what their values are about, because it's not just about the word on paper. Both people could have respect as a value, for example, but their interpretation of it might be different. So I ask people to write down what their interpretation is. So this is not just the couple working on their house and their home, but understanding each other better and understanding what's important to the other person, so that you can then work together to build the home that you want, and to design the home that you want, or the life that you want even, and through understanding one another and where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. And the thing about that whole process of redesigning your home, like I said before, I think the space that you have can really define you. And if you come at it from a just looking at the space that you have, and then, you know, well, we could extend here by this much, and we could create these extra spaces, and then, well, what could we do in there? Well, we'll put some sofas in there, and that can be where the TV goes, and we could put a bed in here, and that could be the guest bedroom or whatever. Yeah. So you kind of like deciding what to do from an outside in perspective, yeah. But that kind of actually what's really important to you, and then looking at those beliefs, those values, and discussing that together, you're really setting yourself up for creating a really beautiful life together. Mm-hmm. And you know, maybe you don't need that extra extension, or maybe it needs to be done in a very particular way to actually, yeah, you know, deliver the life you want.
Absolutely. I think, you know, we can make these decisions, as I said before, without basing it on what's important to us. So if, you know, an adventure outdoor lifestyle is something that's really important to you, and you don't create spaces that allow you to, say, bring the nature in some kind of way, or have spaces to put the things that you want from your nature life, you know, your natural life outside, you know, into an area so that you can, you know, have a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing home, then that may really kind of, you know, come back to bite you because you haven't looked at the internal world first.
So you mentioned about, you know, in the conversations we're having before, you mentioned that sometimes there's potential for us to experience a kind of a conflict of values. And of course, that can easily happen when there are multiple people involved in the conversation. But even just with you, one person, that can happen. So what do we do if that happens?
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things that I mentioned before is understanding one another and understanding your own values more. So that is one thing. But the other thing is, say you have a list of 10 or 15 values, which are your top 3 to 5? And how do you work that out? So I actually go through a process, and I get my clients to imagine suitcases, and I kind of work out each value against one another. But you can simply rank them, really. Like, you know, if you feel like it, if anyone feels like doing it as a couple and saying, okay, you've got 2 suitcases and you're going on a trip, and you've got respect in one suitcase and you've got accountability in another, say, you know, or adventure in another, and you're going on this trip and you can only take one with you, which will you take? And you play each value off against one another. And so that's a really beautiful process to get a ranking, but it can be quite complicated. So you can actually just ask people, get them to kind of rank them themselves, and then just challenge them around it. So you could have them challenge each other around, does that feel right? If you've got adventure at the top, love second, respect third, does that feel right? And you kind of just maybe challenge a few of them if you see. And what will happen is then you have a ranking so that you know that if you have to make a decision between something, oh, well, my top value is adventure. I need a home that reflects that. Or peace is my top value, so I need to have some spaces in my home that allows me to have that peace somehow. So you're looking at what are my top 3 values really, and what's going on with those. But then of course you might have values conflicts with your partner because their top values may not reach yours. So at that point it is about understanding, communicating, speaking about how can we really allow both of us to have our top values, and maybe we can compromise a little bit on those ones that are a bit further down, because as you probably know, there are compromises to be made. And so if there's compromises to be made, it should be in the lower values, not in the things that are most important, like your top 3 to 5 values. You should try to really find ways to express those.
Yeah, that makes. And so how can you tell if you're living out of alignment with your values? What sort of problems can occur when you do that?
Well, for one, it feels out of alignment. If, as I said earlier, if something is not quite right and you're like, yeah, you can usually look at your values and see that one of those is not being met. And I regularly go through my own values and I rank them. So I say, out of 10, how aligned do I feel with this value? And usually if something's going wrong in my life, it's because I'm not aligning with one of those values. And so I can put it, having that consciously there and going through and go, okay, so I'm only a 5 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10 for that one. Maybe I need to think about how can I bring more of that into my life.
And do you have any advice about how to make those changes? Because we can, if we've been living a certain way and we might not be feeling great about that, but and we're living in a way that isn't really in alignment with our values, but that's the way we're living. How can we start to make those choices, to make those changes? Because that can be quite difficult. What would your suggestions be on that?
It can be quite overwhelming as well if you try to do everything at once.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. So it's looking at which is the key one that if you were to change that, it would impact others. So if you like the linchpin, if you were to kind of change one, everything changes. But also it's about coaching for me is all about small steps to achieve big goals. So we can get quite overwhelmed with a big goal, but when we break it down, it's easier. And it's the same with getting out of the rut with our values and a life that's not in line. So it may be looking at which one's lowest and really needs, some work. And then how do I do maybe 1 or 2 things that can make it go up from a 5 to a 7? So, in my life, I want to improve my life, and perhaps I'm not spending time with friends anymore. And that's really, and connection is a really strong value of mine. Then how can I increase that connection by just 2 points? And then if you're considering it about home design, it might be, okay, at the moment, my home scores a 5 on meeting my value of connection because I can't invite friends round very easily because it's a tight space. What could make that a 7 or a 10, but how can I compromise in that as well?
To be honest, that is one of the key drivers for many of my clients, is that they want to be able to have you know, host the Sunday dinner and have, you know, seat the whole extended family, and they actually just don't have space for a table big enough, and they want to be able to have everyone sat down and have that kind of traditional Sunday dinner experience.
Yes.
Or they want to be able to have a more sociable, interactive space with their dining and their kitchen space, and maybe like an island where they can kind of feel like a more informal congregation and having a chat and that kind of relaxed connection. So yeah, that's a really big driver for many of my clients, is that sort of connection with people and being able to create space for their relationships with others.
Definitely. I mean, connection is one of those human needs in many respects. It goes almost beyond values to a degree, and to our needs as humans to have connection. If it's also a value, then you'll feel that really strongly if you're not getting it. And so finding ways to bring those values back into your life. So you may be finding other ways to achieve those values. So on a general level, you might have a lot of connection in your life, but when you then, because you can actually look at the values for your home living, you could do that, and you could say, okay, in terms of your home, how aligned are you with this value of connection? And they may say, well, in my life generally, I'm going great because I go out, I socialize, I meet people, I go to their house. In my own home, I'm not achieving that. So what are the steps that I need to take to alleviate that one thing? And then maybe some of the other things aren't as important, because this one's been, this one helps to bring everything to life.
That's so interesting. And one recommendation that I have made to some of my clients when the space that we're proposing is very different to the space that they already have and any kind of space that they've experienced before, so they're struggling to get a grasp of how that's going to feel, how that's going to work for them. And I have suggested, go and hire a holiday home or somewhere that has a sort of similar layout, similar configuration of space, so you can kind of test it out for a long weekend or a week. And if it is connection with friends, then go and do that with a group of friends and spend the time in there. Would you say that that's a good way to do things?
Absolutely, because what you're doing is you're test running it to see if it does fit with your vision. So I would always kind of suggest trying things out, because you may come up with something that's, oh, well, actually it didn't fit in this way, or yes, this was amazing, but I wish it also had this. So it just allows you to test run that, doesn't it? But I would also really get, from a coaching perspective, we spend a lot of time talking about what are the problems with where you are now. And I actually believe in getting into feeling how sucky it is, because I think change comes when you recognize how bad it is where you are now, and get the impetus for movement, and then look at visualizing what is it, if you had your perfect home, what would that look like, and just describe it in all its beauty. And really, that gets really motivating for people. So it creates this tension of where I am now and I hate it, or I hate this about it, versus this amazing new vision that you have, that and when you then check if it aligns with your values and what's important to you, and it does, then you can get real movement from that. And then when you're going through all this, the pain of the change, you've got that vision to motivate you and look to and help you feel better about the change you're going through at the time. Because I mean, another coaching thing which may make you laugh is that suffering is a way through. And I'm sure that some of your clients suffer on the way through to their final goal.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't make any bones about it. Going through a house extension project is disruptive. It disrupts your life in many ways, and it's not you know, I think to even a Zen master would struggle to, you know, retain a kind of sense of patience and calm throughout a whole the process. It does it's and the fear of that, and the fear of the change, and the fear of the unknown as well, to an extent, can really hold a lot of people back from making those changes. And I think it's a bit like childbirth, you know, it's painful, but once you have that beautiful home, once you're able to live, when you have that freedom to live the way that you really, you know, you'd imagined and you'd hoped for, and you've worked through to get there, then you can really enjoy it. But it almost takes a huge amount of frustration at the beginning to actually get started. And then it also, because it can take time and there can be many bumps on the road, to maintain progress on a construction project, you know, going through design, getting permissions, finding the right builder, and then going through the build itself. There's so many pitfalls, and it can take such a long time. And personal life, you know, I've had clients who've had close relatives die, who've been made redundant, and you know, who've separated. All of these different life things can then impact on, you know, well, what are you going to do with your home? How are you going to reconstruct your life? And actually, what you thought you wanted from your home at the start might change. But actually, it's really interesting, because perhaps if you start from that idea of your values, I mean, do your values change much?
Yeah, so they tend to change in order with big life events, but they don't tend to change as a group of values. And funnily enough, our top values often tend to come to the top often when we are feeling a lack in them. So actually, people do tend to score their top values quite low sometimes in the ranking, and they come to the top because they're becoming more important, because they haven't got that thing, and so they're missing it in their life. They've got a lack of it, and it's important to them. You know, there are values that have been important throughout my life, and have never changed, but they've gone up and down in ranking, as you know, they're a bit lower down because I've actually got it and I'm doing okay in it, and so it's like kind of gone down. But others have kind of come to the top and surfaced because I haven't been really aligned with them, and I haven't noticed them up till now. So they tend to be fairly steady. So, you know, our beliefs change and we can change them. They can sometimes be hard to change. They're what we believe about the world, what we believe to be true. But our values tend to stay fairly steady throughout our life. And it's the kind of big things that change our values, you know. So death, separation, things like that could change values. But it may help you to be more aligned to your values as well. So
when you're saying like that they might go up and down, so it sounds as though perhaps there may be like 3 to 5 top values, but perhaps there's a spectrum, like, you know, 10 to 20 of your values, and they might, you know, just adjust in position in terms of how keen you are to have that value met, depending on where you are in life, and how well met those are already.
Absolutely. So when I was younger, adventure and you know, I look back at how I was. Adventure was top of my list all the time. Variety was very much top of my list, and kind of freedom. Now, freedom is still a value, but funnily enough, once I had my daughter, stability started coming in, and I was like, what's stability about? I'm all about adventure, variety, and freedom. Where's this stability suddenly like getting in the way? And so I had to look at my values a bit more. And of course, I was wanting to provide more for my daughter. I wanted to, you know, so there were new things that were important to me. So, and that probably had always been there, but I hadn't needed it really. So it kind of worked its way up. So it's useful to kind of revisit occasionally your values and find out if there's new ones coming up that perhaps were a bit further down on your list that you didn't really realize were there.
That's so interesting, because I have, I work with clients at all sorts of different life stages, and a lot of my clients, what they're looking to do is create their forever home. And so I have worked with clients who are retired, and so forever is perhaps not as long for them in a way. And then I've worked with clients who are hoping to have children or are expecting their first child, and they're trying to create this home that's going to be their family home, but they don't actually yet have experience of being parents. So that's is there a way to sort of anticipate those change of values?
I mean, it is harder because you're not emotionally invested yet in that to the same extent. So you are, you're feeling the emotions of where you are now, trying to imagine the future. But I mean, you can certainly still set goals based on what you want to achieve, and kind of imagine would be important to you. And you may have an inkling, as I started to consider having a child, I realized that it was going to be there were going to be life changes that came as a result of that. So I could probably look at my values and say, what do I think might come into conflict once I have a child, and once I'm able to, once I have less freedom, for example, and so on. And so it may be that, because freedom is still important to me, very important to me. If I go too long without kind of expressing that, I feel it. And so I have to find ways of expressing that. So it's kind of being true to yourself while recognizing that there's going to be something new that's coming into your life. But it is a little bit harder to imagine future values because you may be wrong about them, So, but you can certainly think to yourself, well, I guess a child is going to, for example, to use as an example, is going to create the need for a little bit more stability in the house, and so on. How do I manage that?
So do you think perhaps reading novels where the characters are in the situation that you're expecting to be in, or watching films where it's, so you can start to kind of get some, because I know when I had my son, I felt like, oh my goodness, I am a terrible person, because I was previously completely unable to empathize with what it's like to have a child, because this is not what I expected at all. It's such a shock, and I couldn't have anticipated it. So knowing that might happen is probably useful, but yeah, that imagining piece.
I think so. So I mean, what comes to mind is, imagine you really valued peace and you're about to have a child, or you're planning on having a child. As a parent, I can say that peace is not something that necessarily comes all the time with having a child. But how can you create that space for you to still have peace in your environment, so that, yes, your child comes, and maybe there'll be a really peaceful child because you are, and so you'll, by osmosis it will extend to your child, and you might be lucky in that way, or you might not. So how can you create those areas where you can have peace even though you have a child as well? So I think it's about recognizing, about being yourself more than trying to anticipate your future kind of values. And then if there is something that comes up that is really big, then yes, you might need to kind of figure out, okay, how do we handle this, if it's really big. But I would say, although they'll come up, they don't tend to really rock your world too hard, because your main values will still stay fairly steady. It might just be that there's a couple of extras that come up, and it might be about, okay, how do I deal with that? Could be the conflict that's happening within you, is how do I deal with that conflict? How do I still maintain these other values that are important to me while this new one's come in, that's come as a result of a life-changing event that actually I need to, look after it. I need to be true to that as well. But how do I still stay true to these ones that are still important to me?
That's really fascinating. There's a lot to think on there. Wow.
So I'm wondering, are you going to go away and ask all your clients about their values?
Well, I ask my clients to consider their homes in terms of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Okay, yes.
And how they feel like their home is meeting their needs.
Wonderful. Yeah.
It's interesting because I don't think that people come to me as an architect to be coached into creating their dream life. So that's where it's an interesting situation that I'm in, because I feel like I am here to help my clients to create more ease in their life, to create more pleasure, to create more harmony between, whoever they're sharing their home with or want to invite into their home, or with their neighbors and their, local community, and with nature as well, because I specialize in eco design, so reducing energy and putting in design features or minimizing negative impact on local wildlife and things like that. So those are the sort of things that I'm aiming to help my clients to achieve, but those are my aims, not necessarily always their aims.
It may not be what they it may not be what they ask for, but it may be what they actually need to get the home and the life that they really desire. Because if we don't align with values and what's important to us, we could end up with a life or a home or another area of life that isn't meeting our values, and then we're unhappy with it. And it's those moments of unhappiness where we realize that something's out of alignment. That's when our values isn't working. So if we can get our values right and understand them and understand ourselves more, then we can create a life that we really want, and we can create that vision for it, and we can start walking towards it. But if we don't know what our values are, we're basing it on unknowns, and we could easily end up with the home, the life, the career, the relationship that we don't want. And
you've just fallen into, because you haven't purposefully, intentionally made those decisions to create what you actually want.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sold on the idea of it. I don't know. I don't know if how many homeowners who don't have a coaching experience or background feel about this. I'd be really interested, actually, if you're watching this, pop in the comments what you're considering about, how you reflect on this, what impact or how are you interpreting this. I did have one person, competitor, saying to me, what a lot of psychobabble. And I thought, okay, that's really interesting, but they were very much interested in the practical, what can you build easily. And for me, home design, there is all this technical aspect to it, and obviously you want to build a house that's not going to fall down and water drains off the roof and doesn't leak in, and all of those things are important, but to me, what I have after it's been like 15 years or so of working with homeowners, people want to live a good quality life, And just building any old thing, you know, just making a house a bit bigger doesn't necessarily lead to that better quality life. So I think this is really important. But I know
I mean, there are questions you can ask without necessarily having to do a whole session on values. You know, asking some of those questions that I started asking you, you saw how easy it was for me to get that to come out of you. So I was teaching some coaching skills to some managers not so long ago, and one of the managers kind of went home and he thought about it, and he went back into the workplace and he spoke to one of his team. He said, what do you, who'd been underperforming, and he said, what do you like doing? He said to the guy, and the guy nearly fell off his chair because he'd never been asked that question before. But it turned out he loved fixing things, and he was in a job which was not doing that. So they put him into a job where he could use the things that he loved doing, and his performance skyrocketed as a result. So when we do things and help people to live by their values, things get better. So just asking a few questions even could help them to uncover the, you know, what's most important, and what do they enjoy doing, and what hobbies do they have, and how, you know, what do those mean to them, and it can really help them to do that. So I believe every person in the world could value from having some level of coaching skills, being able to ask the right questions, being able to understand what's important to others. And just to kind of go back to that model I told you about in the beginning, we cannot see someone else's thoughts, feelings, and their values and beliefs. We don't see that. That's all kind of under the iceberg, so to speak, or under the water in that iceberg model. It's all hidden. We can only know it when we discuss with them, when we talk with them. So if as a couple you're not on the same page, it's because you're maybe not discussing things, and you don't know how to discuss things, and you don't know how to ask for feedback. And we see the external world, but we don't see what's kind of going on under the surface necessarily. And so we need to ask questions. We need to understand them better. We need to get to know them better. And I'm imagining that redoing a house or redesigning a house is as much about the relationships, and I think you even said that earlier on, as it is about the house itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so interesting that you know, I think that the best designs that I've worked on have been when I've been working with clients who are able to have those conversations, and they're able to be very honest with each other. They're comfortable in saying that they don't agree, or they do have a different preference, and they respect each other's differences, and they value that, and they not necessarily trying to change the other person, or definitely not trying to change the other person, but they're, I mean, one thing I say to clients is that, you know, is there anything that, you know, annoys you about each other? Because we could actually design that out so that, you know, one of my clients, her partner would go on a cross-country run with their two large dogs and come back and trail mud all the way through the house. And he loved going on his run. That was his daily routine. He loved it. Obviously, it was great for the dogs as well. And she didn't want to stop him from doing that either. It's just that it was really annoying having all this mud, and she was the one who was ending up having to clean it up. And so we just redesigned their home so that didn't happen. He could still go out, have his run, and come back, and he could get washed and clean himself and clean up the dogs before accessing the rest of the house entirely. And so that respect or an understanding of what you each want, and being able to do that, I think that's crucial. And I think you can get a really good result when you're not trying to stop someone. I have had some, and it's interesting, it tends to be men who say this, is that, you know, I don't really care, I'm happy as long as she's happy, kind of thing. And I sometimes feel like that's it's not necessarily going to bode well for the relationship if he's not getting his needs met, unless perhaps his value is a happy wife, and I don't know, marital harmony, I don't know.
It's possible. But yeah, so what I'm hearing there are definite values in play. So the lady who wanted a clean house, maybe beauty is important to her, maybe cleanliness, maybe, I don't know, there could be other values at play there. On the other, it could be playfulness, adventure, nature, all these other things for the other person. And so having an understanding of your partner and being able to discuss that with them and be able to bring that out is so crucial. As you said, that was kind of one of the best projects you did, because the respect was there, because they had listened to each other and had learned from each other and had that conversation. And I do tend to agree that, if you're putting aside things that are important to you for another person, it's going to make life more difficult down the line, or perhaps you're just not used to respecting yourself. So I would try to encourage these conversations wherever you can. But again, like with everything, and I think there is a caveat to this, is that even with coaching, people need to want it. They need to want to do it. They need to want to have these conversations, and you can only be the kind of the person to bring the idea to them. You can't force them to do it.
Oh, well, that is so true. I once had a client, a couple, and the way that I do it is I have a preparation book which has a series of exercises for my clients to work through. So they're kind of more journaling, and they can complete it in their own time, and they can do it together, or they can do it separately. They can do it however they want, and then they send me that completed preparation, and then I can read through it and I can understand it, and then we have a call to talk through it. But one couple that I worked with, he completed the whole of the book on his own, but he did it, when I was reading it, he did it in 2 different colors of text. It was all digitally done, and so he did one color, putting himself, from his own perspective, what he wanted, and then he imagined himself as his wife and wrote responses to everything in another color on her behalf.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting, because I read through that and I thought, oh wow, they've done a fantastic job. I can see what they each want, and some places it's a bit different. He done a fantastic job of imagining, okay, and this is actually not what I want, but I know that that's what she wants, or that's what I understand that she wants. Yeah. When we got on the call, actually there were many, many, many things that he was not aware of that she wanted.
Yeah.
And it meant that I wasn't able to deliver a design for them, because I just didn't have the information on her behalf. I could, and as I was, the whole process, we go into a call and then we go through a design process all in the same day. And so the design solutions that I was coming up with based on what I'd been given, he was really happy with them. He was like, yes, I can see how that gives us everything we need. It's exactly resolves all the solutions. And she was like, but what about this, and what about that, and I haven't thought about this. And it was like, well, I don't know any of those things, because it's not here. And he was also a little bit perplexed by some of those, because he hadn't considered them. So it's really, but she obviously struggled to do that. And like you say, it's not for everybody not everybody wants to do that.
I mean, that goes back exactly to that model that I talked about at the beginning, where you have your thoughts, feelings, actions, and impact, and you cannot see inside the other person. So as much as you can make assumptions, that's what they are. They're assumptions. You can see kind of, you can get an impact from someone from things they've said, which is their actions, but you can't know. And so filling in on someone else's behalf, you are going to get half the story as a result, because you don't know everything. Great that he tried and he made a good judgment call in most cases, but there were things that he didn't know about, because he can't know about them because he's not that person. So
exactly.
that's why talking is so important, and communicating and talking about what we want.
Yeah. And but I think that what do you want, getting clear on what you want, it's a process. It can be a bit of a process, and like you say, sounds like digging into those beliefs and those values can be a really good way to start to get clear on what it is that you want, and be able to communicate it, because ultimately, to get what you want, you need to know what it is and be able to ask for it, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So those values can really help you to key into what do I actually want in my life, and how does that express itself in my home?
This has been such a fascinating conversation, Sarah. Thank you so much for all of your insights and pearls of wisdom. Yeah, I'm going to definitely consider if there's any way I can add some of these kind of questions into my prep book. And so just to end, how could people work with you, and where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah. So I have an email, which is sarah@northpoint.ac, not .com or anything, .ac. So people can reach out to me on there. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook. If my name's a bit usual, so maybe look for North Point first, which is my company, North Point Academy. So that's the usual places where people can find me: LinkedIn, Facebook, or my email.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And I will put links into the description box, so you don't need to go trying to search. They'll be down there. So thank you again, Sarah. It's been such a pleasure. Really fascinating to hear about this philosophy and how we can use values to guide our choices.
Yeah.
And I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Bye.
I just need to stop the recording. There we go.
Yeah.